All right, guys. Wow, there's quite a few people here. I was expecting to have less audience. I see that people are still coming in, and I'm just going to take a picture real quick. That's for Twitter, of course. All right. Okay, let's get to the more important stuff. So, today I'm here to talk about what happened to web development. All right, that's a pretty general title. And you're going to see why, of course. So, who I am, my name is Konstantin Dinev. I work at Infragistics. I am a senior manager and product lead for all of the web tools products at Infragistics. So, what that means is I have an organization at Infragistics that's about 50 people, and we do quite a variety of web development, mostly focusing on tools, all right? Recently, I actually took over another division as well, which is Indigo Design. And if you were in the session that Stefan was giving just now in the alpha room, that product family, that product line is also under me. All right? So last time I was here up on this stage was in 2015. It wasn't at ISTA, it was at another conference. But I was talking about basically the same that I'm going to talk about today, but in a different context. So I was talking about the general state of web development. You know, to summarize what I said in 45 minutes back then, I basically said that web development in 2015, at that point in time, was utter and complete chaos, all right? Why I said that is because the ecosystem of tools, frameworks, libraries to choose from was so unstable. It was, you know, none of the tools that people were using were really at the release state. You know, some of them were released but were technically alphas. Some of them were released but were technically betas. NPM was actually used already to a quite wide extent, but NPM itself was a beta tool. Because the most important thing for a package manager is, like, do you know what it is? All right? It's caching, all right? And caching didn't work on NPM in 2015. All right, and if you have a package manager that cannot cache and restore packages locally, then something is wrong. All right, so what I'm going to say today is not a personal opinion. I didn't choose to talk about this topic and to, you know, bring up the things that I'm going to say because I believe things are the way they are, but because data shows it. Let's look at what things were in 2015. So if we're talking about an IDE or an environment that web developers were using back in 2015, the most commonly used tool was good old Notepad. All right? And Notepad is a 20-year-old tool. I mean, you were using different variations of it. So I was personally using Notepad++, which was, you know, the top answer of the Stack Overflow survey in 2015. And this survey had about 11,000 responses. So this is relevant data. All right, Sublime Text it's still Notepad. You know, a lot of these things were. Vim wasn't. Okay, but in 2018 we have a shift. What happened? Visual Studio Code happened, okay? And VSCode is still a text editor, right? But it has a lot of tooling around it. And that's what makes it popular. I'm going to show later more on the subject, okay? Visual Studio is no longer leading in terms of general IDE. And this is all respondents. This is the Stack Overflow survey from 2018, and it's surveying around it has about 75,000 responses, okay? So this is, again, relevant data. Okay, let's move on. This is what people see in every day at work, or at least 37% of you do. You know, so let's talk about technology a little bit, because this is only, you know, IDE tooling. So in 2015, JavaScript was already the top technology. We had a keynote earlier today. It was about IoT, and then at the end, it was JavaScript, right? Because you know what was said is that if you are a JavaScript developer, you're actually going to make a difference in the IoT development. So, at that point of time, libraries, frameworks, stuff was still unstable for web. But jQuery was good, okay? And jQuery was actually a prevalent library when doing web development. In terms of other frameworks, it was unclear. Like people were choosing Angular JS, some were doing Knockout still, people were doing Ember. I can keep going for probably more than 45 minutes, which is the time that I have for this presentation. Now, this year's survey shows that Node and Angular are top technologies already. And that's to all respondents. It's not only web developers, all right? That again, at the bottom, you cannot read it, but it has about 52,000 respondents, okay? So, as I said it already 2 times, Stack Overflow survey is actually very relevant. All right, and so because of this data, I'm talking about Angular, throughout the session. And I'm not talking simply because Infragistics, for example, offers tools for Angular, but because Angular seems to be, a very relevant technology at the moment. All right, but I said people are now using VSCode, right, as an editor. I also am saying that Node is a de facto standard. And now, this is actually the most modern tool for development. Command line. So we moved from a 20-year-old technology for web development to a 30-year-old technology for web development. It's actually even more than that, right? But how did Angular become so popular? I mean, it hasn't miraculously happened, right? So the primary reasons for a framework, because Angular is a framework, to become very popular are the ease of use, the tooling, and the ecosystem around it. And so Angular is very popular because, first of all, it's very easy to use. And it provides you with a way to rapidly develop applications. But also because it has a lot of tooling built around it. And there is a very large ecosystem of individual developers as well as large companies that provide, tools, libraries, or other helpful things around Angular. So, how is it easy to use? What does ease of use mean? I actually, when I was making this slide, I put like 10 bullets. All right. So 5 of them I narrowed down to reusability. So reusability means also, that this framework is testable. Like it provides you with an easy way to test your applications. It's extensible. Like that's very, very important. It makes updates easy. Now, I don't know, like, how many of you use NPM? Like, can I get a raise of hands? I actually thought more people would be using it, all right? So, updating packages in NPM, because your project usually relies on a lot of them, has been a pain. And when I was up here in 2015, I basically said that the NPM update is a forbidden command, because you knew at that point that if you run it, everything breaks. Like your application wouldn't even build. That's no longer the case. And actually, Angular provides you with an easier way to update packages than ever before. Now, quick time to market, I already mentioned a little bit about that. So when you build applications with Angular, it's very rapid. Like the time it takes you from 0 to deploying to production is much less for the same level of application than what you would have spent in 2015 building it with jQuery. And that's a fact, actually. If you don't believe me, you got to try it out, all right? And the quick learning curve. Now, this is actually one of the most important things, and it actually goes back to the quick time to market. It's very easy to get going with this framework because it abstracts for you things related to web development that otherwise you would spend a lot of time banging your head against the wall with, all right? Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into tooling. So, well, I mentioned some of the most important things, but the most important thing in terms of tooling for Angular is the Angular CLI. All right, so Angular has a lot of features, and it lets you turn on a lot of things. But if you have to do it manually, it wouldn't be painless. Like it will actually take a lot of time. You'll have to read a lot of documentation. You will try to execute it twice, 3 times, 4 times, and fail. And then on the 5th time, you're actually going to get it right. The CLI sets it up for you. And it exposes such things like progressive web applications or server-side rendering, production builds as simple commands that you just execute and they come preset. Okay. VSCode has a lot of tooling for Angular. Now, for example, there's an Angular language extension for VSCode, but that's not the most important thing. So VSCode has great support for TypeScript, and TypeScript is built on, and Angular is built with TypeScript. So natively, VSCode is by Microsoft, TypeScript is by Microsoft, so you would assume it supports it well, and it really does. I put up here WebPack. I don't know if any of you has tried to set up a WebPack build manually. it's like, anyone? One person. Wow. So I really feel you. It probably wasn't easy, right? So there's a lot of things that you configure there. You don't get it right the first time. If you use the Angular CLI and if you use Angular, everything comes preset and you just run one command and already have production builds, all right? So let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem. Now, as I said already, there is a lot of individual developers putting up stuff for Angular. There's a lot of companies putting up stuff for Angular. So for example, Infragistics has Ignite UI for Angular, which is our UI component library. There's Indigo Design, which is a whole design system, backed up by code generation to Angular, which actually produces Ignite UI for Angular in the end. There is NativeScript by Progress. It allows you to set up builds for your application that produce native applications for Android and iOS. There's ng Bootstrap, which is Bootstrap for Angular. I mean, nothing more to say there. Ionic is pretty similar to NativeScript. It also has components. I also put our CLI up here. Now, you may ask why we have a CLI, since Angular already have one. Well, at the time that we built it, Angular CLI was actually not extensible. Even though an Angular CLI is forked from the Ember CLI, I think, is it? A little bit. All right, and its predecessor is extensible. Angular CLI wasn't for like over a year, so that's why we had to build our own and to make life easier for our customers. But it wasn't always like that. Angular wasn't so popular. You saw the 2015 survey results. If I go back to that slide, you will see something that you for sure haven't noticed because of the font size, because it was too small to read. But that thing is, when I was showing technology on the 2015 slide, there was AngularJS on the slide. And AngularJS was all the way on the bottom, had like 13, 14% of responses given to it. And I'll tell you something about AngularJS and how it all started before it gets to this point. So last week, I was at Angular Connect in London, and Igor Minar was giving the first keynote session on the first day. Igor Minar is the technical lead on the Angular core team. And he was telling us an anecdote about what happened when they tried to pitch AngularJS internally to Google for internal use. So at that point, AngularJS wasn't still wasn't the framework that some of you may have already worked with. AngularJS is also known as Angular 1. But at that point, it wasn't a public tool. It was something that this team was trying to pitch to developers at Google so that they start using it. And that was based actually on demand that was given internally. All right, and so they're giving their presentation to Google VPs, and everything is going perfect. Like they're, they're showing the tool, they're showing what it does, and basically Google VPs call them all liars. All right, so they're like, "Whoa, what's happening?" And Urs, who is the VP of engineering at Google, has said, and that's back in 2010, actually, says to them, well, if what you're saying is 50% correct, then everyone would want to use it, not just Google, right? But at this point, we're not seeing demand from anyone else. So if you go out, make this tool public, and people really want to use it, then we would actually adopt it, right? So that kind of, pushes the team to prove that this is really something that works so well, or as well as they claim. Okay, and we all know what happened afterwards. AngularJS was actually a huge success, and that was initially advertised as the framework that Urs doesn't want you to use. Okay, so I actually have my own anecdote. It's not around AngularJS, it's around Angular. So in terms of ecosystem, we believed in Angular, and Angular here, talking Angular 2 and on. We believed in that tool. We were in this hype moment. I don't know if you remember from the first keynote. And we really were invested into providing tools for Angular. And that was around an alpha stage, or maybe even before alpha at that point in time. Okay, and we started building our library. We actually got, decent results. We had quite a few components already produced. And around the time of Angular RC6, okay, release candidate 6, I'm in a meeting with some of the people on my team and with the VP in our company, Jason Barris. He was actually supposed to be here today, but I don't see him. And I basically said, look, this thing is going nowhere. I don't think this Angular, promise is ever going to hold up. I think we should drop this product because we're wasting our time. Why I said that, how I backed it up is I said, look, we're on RC6. We moved to RC6 from RC5 in 4 days, right? They were released 4 days apart. And just the same as what happened from RC4 to RC5, there's so many breaking changes that we literally have to rewrite, half of our framework. And, I'm asking, okay, so if the same thing's going to happen 4 days ahead, right, after 4 days, and we have to rewrite it again, they're at RC7, then we'll have to keep wasting a lot of time. But what I said is, if they are breaking everything, then they don't have a clear concept of what they want to release. Like, they obviously have fundamental issues. So I said, we should drop this product. We didn't. 2 weeks later, Angular got released. RC8 turned into the final Angular 2 version. Okay, and good thing we held up. We were actually very skeptical afterwards. We were at the low point of that graph from the keynote in the morning. And we were like, I don't know if we want to keep working with this, right? Because now Angular 2 is released, but in Angular 3, they're going to break everything. And then they said there's not going to be an Angular 3. They said there's going to be a 4. We're like, what the, why are you skipping a version? You just said you're going to do semantic versioning, and you're skipping 3. All right? They had some reason for it. I think core was already at 3, so they wanted to move to 4. But, I'm talking about all this, and I'm not up here to just give you a theoretical session on why Angular is a good thing and how tooling for Angular helps you. I'm not only a manager on the web tools team at Infragistics, I'm also a developer. And I've been a web developer for about 10 years now. So I've done pretty much everything from PHP, web forms, jQuery development, web APIs, whatever you can think of. Like, Rails, Django, blah blah blah. All right, so let's put things into some action, right? I'm gonna do what every presenter dreads, and I dread it as well. I'm gonna try to do some live coding, and I have 2 demos. I hope that they're gonna go well. If they don't, I still have the final results, so I'm gonna be able to show you something. But you know, let's put a task, right? So the task is, I want to start building an app, okay? And for my MVP, let's call it that way, to get started, to have something looking like an app, I want to get an app shell with some navigation and some user accounts, preferably with OpenAuth, with OpenID. Okay, and what I'm going to use is the Ignite UI CLI. I'm going to use some VS Code. I also need the Angular CLI, or at least I'm going to show you something from it in this one. So let's see how that goes. All right. How's the font, by the way? Do you see at the back? Good? No good? No good? Okay. Better? Better. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, I have this, I said I'm going to use Ignite UI CLI. So I'm just going to run a command for a new project. Okay. So I'm going to call it ISTA app 2018. And I want to build it with Angular, Ignite UI for Angular. I want site navigation plus login, and I want custom theming. Now, this is the complete and run phase. And in the complete and run phase, I'm actually not going to hit enter. So after complete and run, what the CLI would do is it will run npm install. And npm install, I saw a lot of hands using npm, is going to take quite some time, which I don't have for this demo. So I have this thing already running, okay? And I have made only one modification. I'm pretty sure I can show it, but I'm not going to. I've just put a Google Client ID for open authentication, okay? And so what I'm getting is this, all right? So as you can see, I actually have all of my prerequisites for getting started with this app already done, right? I have a top, like a nav bar. I have site navigation, which is opened at the moment, and also have a login button. Now what happens if I click here? So, okay, and get on a login form and a sign up with Google button. And I signed up with Google, all right? That came prepared for me. So the IGNU actually scaffolded all this for me. So the time that it takes to get to what my requirement was is about 2 minutes with the npm install. If I'm not on the Wi-Fi on the cellular, it's going to be 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how many packages we're installing. So that's pretty fast, isn't it? I mean, now you're going to say, well, could have done the same thing with Visual Studio and web forms, right? I would get the same kind of project template. Same thing goes with MVC, right? So let me go back to extend. And I would have gotten the same kind of project template. I would have login screens and stuff. You know, with MVC, with the default project templates, you get that, which is true. So I'm getting pretty much the same functionality out of the Ignite UI CLI or Angular CLI, but I'm doing it in an Angular context. So I have a single page application. I also get one other advantage. Now, as I said previously, the framework offers me a lot of reusability, right? And this is a claim at this point. Like, you haven't seen it being reusable. How many of you are using Angular? Oh, okay. So I actually put spoiler in the session with Angular, like in the title that was listed on the website, because I didn't intend this to be purely 101 session, but you know, I expected people to have heard of Angular and to have been using it already. But even if you haven't, I'm going to show you stuff to display how robust the framework is. So next thing is, let's look at an app that is real. Like that, what I just showed is an app shell, right? We don't have an actual application running inside. I just have the frame for it. Okay, so now let's hope this one is not going to fail, right? Nope. All right, this is going to be really hard with the font size. Okay, I have another application here which is running, and let me zoom out a little bit. Just show something. All right, so this is not a getting started application. You see there is actually a lot of components in this one, and there is more and more and more. So this is an application that I've been building in my own free time, and I'm using it to do something for my hobby, as well as to dock food on the products that we have at Infragistics. So the only way to see whether a product is any good is to try using it, right? So let me go back to the browser. I have the application running right here, and it's a looking for group application for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So you can guess already what my hobby is, right? Play computer games. Yeah, like any geek does. But what I'm going to try to do in front of you, well, actually, I'm going to do it, but you know, if I have Wi-Fi, is I want to take this portion of my profile view component, which is the maps that I play, and I want to propagate it to my teams component. Now, my teams component currently doesn't have a map pool. All right, it has some team details, stuff like that, but doesn't have a map pool. But technically, teams also have map pools. So I can approach this thing two different ways, right? First way is the ostrich approach. I can do some code duplication. I'm just going to take the code from my player details component. With the markup, I'm going to stick it into my teams component, and I'm done, right? I mean, yeah, I got to run it to see that it works, but that's not a good approach. I mean, code duplication only creates a mess moving forward. If you want to know why, it's because when something changes in one of my components, I got to go and propagate the same change to the other one, right? Okay, so this is going to be the difficult part. I already have made the change to see that it works, right? I'm going to undo it, and I'm going to try to do it again in front of you. So I want to get rid of this one as well. So for this purpose, I have my bash running here because, as I said, this is the most modern development tool. I'm going to use the Angular CLI to generate another component, which is going to be my map pool component. Okay, we have a component. You see all the changes. The component is already put into my app module. And I also have the template, the TypeScript for it, the TypeScript component. I even have a spec file, which is for tests. So for those of you who are not doing Angular, who who are not that familiar. So this is what the CLI does for you. It can generate things for you very quickly, scaffold them so that it kickstarts what you're doing. Okay, now I'm just going to go into my player details component. I'm going to find the portion of the code that I need, which is for the map pool. And it's actually here. So I'm going to take it, copy it over, and make it my map pool template. All right, so far so good. Now I got to take the first functional part, which is when the checkbox is clicked on those maps, it actually updates my service. And so this is done right here. I'm going to take this as well and put it in my map pool component. Now, all right, so far so good. I don't have anything, so I get a lot of errors at this point because things are not defined. So I'm gonna put an API service right here and inject it in the constructor. See how Visual Studio Code helps me? It actually made the import for me just, on auto-suggest. So this is the integration that VSCode has with TypeScript. So a lot of, if I have to go back into the how we were doing web development before, I would actually have to go and find the path of my JavaScript file and include it into my HTML file as a script import. It was just a lot of mess. Now things are a lot easier. Now I still have things that are underlined here. Actually, don't need this because the map pool component is technically not going to make any service calls. It's just going to serve as a component that displays the updates and then outputs actions whenever they happen. All right, so far, let me remove this for a moment. So far, I still have an empty template, like an empty component. I'm not using it anywhere. Not using the API service. Actually, I don't even have to inject this API service anymore because, as I said, I'm not going to do service updates. But I somehow need to tell this component what the different player map pools are, right? I'm going to use an Angular input for that. And I'm going to call it map pool. Okay, now let's go and make some changes here. Okay, so far so good. Let's see. I should have errors down here. And yes, so I no longer have a player in my map pool component. I only have a map pool input, right? So I'm going to loop over that. But let's see what I have so far. So at this point, nothing should be working. Yeah, I don't have a second map pool rendered yet. All right. So oops. As I said, somehow I need to notify my other components that something has changed in this one, right? And I'm going to call my output update. Need this import and hit this import. Okay, so far Visual Studio saved me, Visual Studio Code saved me a lot of time because it did the imports for me. All right, now I have an input and output. So how inputs and outputs work in Angular is an input is a way for parent components to talk to their child components, to propagate data to them. And an output is a way for child components to actually propagate updates up to parent components. And not only, like parent components can keep propagating the things up the chain to other components. All right, so let me now comment out the old player details thing. I have two unsaved things. Let me see what they are, though. Okay. We still have a map pool, but I cannot click on the checkboxes. All right. So why can I not do this? Is because I say that disabled is something that is not defined in my component, and so since it's not defined, it's just gonna turn it from undefined to true, and it's disabled. So I actually make the changes only if the authenticated user is actually the player whose profile this is showing. So I'm going to make another input and propagate this down from my other component. Something broke, I think. Yeah. I should save this. Okay, now I have checkboxes. And if I click any of the checkboxes, I'm actually not getting the update propagated right now on the service. This only a UI update is happening because the component that I have is at this point is not propagating any updates. So what I'm going to do in my map change is I'm going to say that I'm going to emit this update event with the new value of the object that I'm bound to. All right, and now the last update is going to happen, which this would now turn into the method that I bind to this output. So my argument is now going to be of a different type, and I gotta bind it. Still have an error because I no longer need this. And here I can just use my argument because my API service call takes a map pool. So I'm doing it live, may not work. Success! I actually updated my API. Okay, so I'm just, you know, if you want me to prove it, that I'm not just displaying a toast, I can actually open the local database to show it. Okay, so far I did nothing. I just created a new component. I refactored my player details component, but I'm still not reusing this, right? I still have to pass it down to my other Teams component, okay? So what I'm going to do for the Teams component in order to put this in is I'm going to make it part of this team strategy section, okay? So I'm going to put it on top right here in this tab. So, this is my team strategies. And right here, I'll put an app map pool. So this is going to do nothing. Okay, because I'm still not binding it to anything. I'm just getting the header, but I'm not getting any maps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, actually not here, but let me see if that put the, yeah, it put the correct type, but it just put an inline import. I don't want an inline import. I want this. Okay. So now, let's bind it. Ta-da, nothing. Okay. Why am I getting nothing at this point? Is because it's not called map pool, it's called maps. Have the maps, they're disabled again, right? Okay, I solved that problem just now. I actually shouldn't be calling this input player's user, because in this case the map pool should be actually auditable only by admins, but okay. Let me see what. Right, this is something that I need to propagate from my parent component actually, which is right here. All right, that's going to take some time, and I have only 2 minutes left. So basically, I'm going to set it to true, just for the purpose of the demo. And I'm going to bind the output. Okay. Okay, they're editable now. They're not going to change the maps because I haven't defined my method. But if I do that, then I'm going to have everything refactored and reusable. Okay, so since I have about a minute left, that was, the more real life scenario of how Angular makes things really reusable. So to go back to what I was talking about and to finish this presentation. Now, I was trying to make a point that this thing is really easy to work with, right? And the tooling and ecosystem around it are making it really easy to use and to work with. And the demo showed that I did some, you may not call it that major refactoring, but some heavy refactoring pretty easily. Like I did it quickly. I managed to do it in a demo. So that's my let's say final argument that you should use this framework and you should invest yourself in it and make it a choice for yourself whenever you're doing web development. And with that, I want to thank you all that you bore with me, through this session. I hope you didn't fall asleep. If you want to know anything about Angular or about the tooling that we provide or about tooling that is provided by somebody else for Angular or by the Angular team itself, just I'm going to try to stick around Panorama after this session and tomorrow at different times. So just if you cannot find me in Panorama, I'll be somewhere out here or even at the Infragistics booth. Thank you, everyone.